Hi, it's me, ISA certified arborist Curtis Short, pruning young trees in Santa Rosa, California. Here's an introduction to shaping trees into more urban-friendly forms by selecting for a sturdier, more practical structure while your tree is still small. To dive deeper into this topic, be sure to watch UC Professor Emeritus Larry Costello's 19-minute video from 2012 titled Training Young Trees. Although Dr. Costello refers to his method as structural pruning, it closely matches the pruning that Dr. Ed Gilman of the University of Florida describes as creating urban-compatible architecture. I learned the basic approach for urban tree pruning at several International Society of Arboriculture events beginning in 2011, and what follows is my interpretation of this process. I like to call this creating urban-friendly trees, since that makes it clear we're talking about urban or suburban trees, and it rolls off the tongue better than urban-compatible architecture or formative structural pruning, and it sounds friendly. You will often encounter a 5-step method for structurally pruning young trees based on Dr. Costello's teaching. However, I have difficulty remembering 5-part lists, so you will find the essence of Dr. Costello's method here, but I present the core process in 3 steps. In this video, I illustrate this method of pruning trees, which makes them safer and less prone to structural failure at maturity. This regimen also allows us to make trees easier to see under and around and to move under and around. Plus, it enables us to keep branches clear of built human structures. When a mature tree has contours that are unfriendly to our urban needs, we often prune it in ways that drastically shorten its life. Having an urban-friendly form allows a tree to live longer and grow larger, to store more carbon, and provide more benefits than a typical small and short-lived urban tree offers. Unfortunately, it can be difficult to find many mature trees that have an urban-friendly form, but this cemetery Douglas fir illustrates some of what we want. First, the tree should have one dominant leader, meaning one primary stem running the entire length of the tree that stands high at the top above every other branch. Secondly, all the branches that are attached to that dominant leader need to be small in diameter relative to the leader diameter at the level of attachment and have ample vertical spacing up and down the stem between branches. I'll talk more about branch spacing later. Finally, we want our trees to flare out wide at the base where they meet the ground. We call this a trunk taper or trunk flare. These 3 attributes can all be developed with proper pruning. The best trunk taper is created by leaving all lower branches on the trunk for as many years as possible, but simply shortening those branches to keep them out of the way in the near term. Here's a sycamore that has a somewhat urban-friendly form. Notice that it does have a dominant leader and branches that are small in diameter relative to the main stem, even though the branches are a bit numerous and crowded. We need to create more urban-friendly trees so that one day we will have many extra sturdy examples. Once strong tree structure is created, little, if any, substantial tree work will be needed for many years into the future. Let's go to this backyard full of ginkgo trees to create a more urban-friendly tree. Considering how large these trees can grow, if we do not prune them to be more urban-friendly, it will be difficult to maintain all 4 trees in this small space. I'll talk through how I choose to reshape this particular ginkgo tree. While ginkgos have their own special peculiarities, our urban-friendly pruning process will apply to nearly any type of shade tree. When they are newly planted, it's important not to prune trees at all, beyond removing dead, diseased, or damaged branch parts, if there are any of those. We wait at least 1 year after planting to begin our pruning process. The idea is to ensure our tree grows roots first, rather than wasting its limited resources on regrowing shoots lost to premature pruning. This ginkgo was planted more than a year ago, so its roots should be well established, and we can begin pruning. I will show you how we get from the unpruned tree on your left to the fully pruned tree on your right. Here are the branches that I cut away. That's quite a lot of pruning. You might be saying, wait, another video told me not to prune more than 25% of the branches. What's going on? Remember when I said that we need to wait at least a year before pruning our tree? This is why. When a young tree has a strong functional root system, it is in a crazy fast growth period that can handle substantial pruning. If our tree had come from the nursery with a more acceptable form, such extensive pruning would not have been necessary. Now I'll show you my pruning process for creating a more urban-friendly tree. If I accomplish nothing else, it is most important that I establish a dominant leader, since competing leaders are prone to breakage. Notice that this tree does not have a leader running right up the center of the tree. That is why I am seeking to create a dominant leader rather than a central leader. Our leader does not need to be in the center of the tree. Whatever the leader's position, our dominant leader tree will be strong and beautiful at maturity. As it now stands, this tree strongly forks into a pair of codominant leaders, so I would like to choose one of these and eliminate the other. The long, strong leader on your left looks like an excellent choice for retaining. However, this tree had been poorly staked, and the stake had been left on long enough to badly damage that contender. So I will instead retain only the leader on your right. Unfortunately, this leader itself forks into a codominant branch pair, so one of these two will need to be selected for retention and the other shortened or removed. Upon close inspection, we see that the fork to the outside of the tree has the strongest and straightest connection, so that is the one I will choose to retain. There is also a tall branch growing from down low that is threatening to compete with our leader, so for now I am going to shorten it just above a branch pair. Our first task is now accomplished. We have established a dominant leader for this tree that stands high above all branches, giving it a much more urban-friendly form. Next, we'll move on to our second task, selecting this tree's permanent branches. The permanent branches will form a scaffold that will remain on this tree throughout its entire life. Any other branches we leave will be merely temporary branches that we will remove in a future year. Our permanent branch selection process starts at the bottom, where we establish what will be the lowest of our permanent branches. I've selected this one as our lowest permanent branch. For pedestrian areas such as this, we generally choose a lowest permanent branch 8 feet above the ground, which is precisely where this lowest permanent branch is located. Next, working my way from our lowest permanent branch upward, I choose all the other branches I'll retain, and then I remove all the largest competitors, leaving only smaller, weaker branches in between to draw some tree resources in order to keep our chosen permanent branches relatively small in diameter. Here is another look at the before and after pruning photos showing our permanent branch selection process. I try to leave at least 1 foot of vertical space between each of my permanent branches. I also space out my branches radially around the trunk. Now that we've completed our second task of establishing our permanent branch framework, this tree has a less congested core, which will make it less prone to internal branch breakage at maturity. Next, we can move on to the final step, subordinating the lowest branches of our tree, by which I mean everything below the lowest permanent branch. I'll be shortening those branches to keep them from competing with our newly established tree structure, and to keep them small in diameter so that removing them later will have little adverse effect on the tree. Right off, I can see that this branch that I shortened previously will have to go. It is just too strong and upright growing, and the one below it is just as bad in that respect. And since they both grow from the same trunk level, there is just way too much strong growth that low on the tree. I'm going to completely remove the bottommost one of these two, because sometimes we just need to remove the most incorrigible branches. I'll cut the upper one just a few inches from the trunk, where there is currently a small branch pair. I like retaining this small part of that upper temporary branch so that it will continue to nourish the trunk and help the tree respond to the wound I will be creating below it. Here are those cuts. On the other side of the tree, there are more branches that threaten to outcompete our lowest permanent branch, so I will shorten those down lower. Finally, I see some upright bits that will give my lowest permanent branch too much competition, so down with those. We've done it. We've optimized our tree's urban friendliness with a strong single leader and well-spaced branches that begin at the correct height. And we've kept some modest low temporary branches to feed the trunk for building trunk taper, as well as to help protect the lower trunk from sun damage. Here then is the sequence of all the cuts I just made to get us here. We'll take a quick look at one more tree to give you a sense of what comes next. Here is a Chinese pistache tree that came out of the nursery with an unfriendly hydra head of competing leaders. This tree had already had a couple of years to settle in and establish its root system, so now I'll get to work pruning it like this. Here it now clearly has a more urban-friendly 1-liter form. Because we need substantial clearance for the sidewalk and roadway, this tree has not yet grown tall enough to supply us with many permanent branches. The first ones will be up here. After this first round of pruning on this tree, I return annually to perform tune-up prunings. These follow-ups are much easier than the initial work of puzzling how to sort jumbled branches into a more urban-friendly form. After 4 to 5 years of annual tune-ups, it is likely that we will have the core structure of the tree well enough established that we can pretty much call it good to go for life. Let's fast forward with this Chinese pistache to the point where it had already had 2 annual prunings followed by another year of growth. Look at how robust that thing has grown. This is the crazy fast growth phase of a tree's life, like a kid going into adolescence. Now here I'll show you before and after my most recent tune-up of this tree. You can see that on this round of pruning, I mostly shorten vigorous upright lower growth so that the leader remains dominant and the temporary branches don't outcompete our permanent branches. At each successive annual pruning visit, I run through my 3 urban-friendly tree shaping steps to re-establish that dominant leader, see that the tree still has well-spaced permanent branches, and make sure that the lowest branches remain subordinate. Now, if we look at how that tree leaves out in the summer, you'll notice that for the moment, this tree looks rather columnar. Rest assured, however, that it will develop a more round-headed form at maturity, similar to these Chinese pistache trees that were not structurally pruned. Our urban-friendly pruning will make the core of a tree stronger and better configured for our needs, but it will not change the overall growth character of a given tree species or tree variety. On a final tune-up pruning visit, we can at long last remove the low temporary branches that had previously been retained, but leaving lowest branches on the trunk for a few years greatly benefits the tree. Thank you for watching this video on creating urban-friendly tree forms. Trees are stronger, grow larger, and live longer when pruned to be more urban-friendly. Be a good urban forest steward. Make your trees more urban-friendly.